Hi, I'm Adam Summer. You're listening to the Yerushalmi Talk podcast with the support of the Yeshivat Javar Yerushalayim in Har Nof,
Three
Jerusalem.
Halacha 7, and we're continuing with the Shechiv Mera, and we know the next part of the Mishnah is talking about if the person's on his deathbed and he left over land for himself, the gift stands even if he recovers. And the Gemara is going to comment on that. So now what's happening is we're going to look at these different instances and these different cases and get into this sort of different type of gradation. So now the Gemara is going to get into this other type of case. What happens if the person turns over all the land, but he keeps for himself all the movables? Is that going to be a valid deathbed gift? Does the person get his stuff back in the case that he recovers? So Rabbi Bina says, in the name of Rabbi Yermiah, if the Shechiv Mera left over only movables for himself and not land, he did not do anything. It is as if he did not retain any property for himself, and the gift is invalid if he recovers from his illness. So let me explain this a little bit. When a person keeps land, the gift is going to be valid even if he recovers, because we understand that when making a gift, he expected to recover, and that the land was retained for his needs, his own needs. And this applies only to land because a person retains land in order to plant crops and sustain himself through them. So we could see that in the mind of this person is not a Shechiv Mera because he was of the mind that he was going to recover, and he would have, had he really been on a deathbed, he would have really turned over all the land, and he would have not kept any for himself. But if we see he's keeping some of the land for himself, we can see that he has this feeling that he's going to recover. Because of that, that kind of gift is not a valid deathbed gift. So if somebody was in that sort of situation and he did give a gift, it would be as if the person was a healthy person giving a gift, and there'd be no difference because the person expected to recover in either case. So in a way, it's like the person is a healthy person, and that's a valid gift. So Rabbi Bina is now pointing out, well, what happens if it's just movables? So we know that if you have land that you expect to plant crops in the future and sustain himself, so you could see, okay, well, if he's keeping some land, then definitely it's not a deathbed gift because you have the intention of planting in the future, meaning that you're going to recover. But with regards to the movables, a person cannot sustain himself through them on an ongoing manner. And therefore, if he leaves only movables, where he does not take, it shows he does not take an indication he expects to recover. In other words, he turns over all the land, but he keeps removables for himself. And rather, we understand that he made the gift because he expected to die, and the gift is therefore void if he recovers. So in this kind of case, we could see, well, wait a second. What happens if you're keeping for yourself movable products or property that has a gigantic value to it? Does that mean that you really had a deathbed gift? You turned over a small amount of land, but you were very rich in movable property. What's going to be the case for that? And the Gemara is going to ask and say, come and see what you are saying. If he retained any land of any size whatsoever for himself, he has means of sustenance. For if he retained precious stones and pearls for himself, he does not have means for sustenance. So you could say, okay, well, precious stones and pearls are movables and are thus included in Rabbi Bina's teaching that movables are not considered a source of sustenance. So, okay, so you have this case where he turns over land, even if it's not a large quantity of land, and he keeps for himself stones and pearls. So is that going to be a deathbed gift? Now, I want to point to something that comes up later in another sugya, in another masechet in in the Yerushalmi, and the Hachamim point out that even if you have a tiny amount of land, tiny amount where you can have it like a window box, in other words, a piece of strip of land right outside your window, and they say that even that tiny strip of land has a lot of value because you can use it to grow saffron, and saffron we know is worth a lot of money, and you can sell that saffron and sustain yourself. So even on a small plot of land, it can have a lot of value. So they're saying, okay, if you're turning over all of your land, it means that you're not intending to sustain yourself in the future. And even if he's retaining precious pearls for himself, it says that he does not have means for sustenance. So you really wonder about this. You say, well, how can it be? In other words, a person can certainly obtain sustenance from selling off precious stones and pearls, and more than a small plot of land. So then, why is it that it is this as if he had nothing for himself? So that they're saying, evidently, there must be no difference between land and movables, even if the Shechiv Mera leaves only movables for himself, the gift stands. So it looks like the Gemara is rejecting the opinion of Rabbi Bina. So the Bavli, by the way, the Bavli Baba Batra 150b concludes that even if the Shechiv Mera leaves only movables, the gift stands. So they're both agreeing with this case. So how can it be that if you're leaving a large amount of wealth and you've turned over all your land, but it's a small amount of land, that's gonna be a deathbed gift? Why is it that that's the case? And there's some really great insights by the Stay Yeshua, where that it's pointing out the Gemara is not really rejecting Rabbi Bina's ruling, but rather gives an explanation for it, and that it's going to be basically saying in this Stay Yeshua that this is one of those cryptic sugyas in the Yerushalmi, and it needs explaining, but that actually it's not. They're not actually rejecting Rabbi Bina's ruling. And according to this approach, the Gemara is stating factually that land is considered a means of long-term sustenance, whereas movables are not, even if they are precious stones and pearls. And the Sedei Yeshua explains that this is the case because precious stones and pearls offer no security, as they can easily be lost or stolen. And land, by contrast, is a secure means of sustenance because it will always be there. And it's one of these cases where even the small window box of land can continuously be used to grow saffron. But here, in the case of having a big amount of wealth and pearls and stones, well, those can be stolen. That's not actually a security at all. Land, it's very hard to steal land. You can't steal land, but there's halachic issues about stealing land. But it's very hard to steal land. But it's very easy to steal somebody's pearls. It's very easy to steal somebody's gems. And so they're saying that that's really not a security. In any case, what Rabbi Bina's point comes to do is comes to shape what the halacha is, which is that, hey, land goes out, this is a deathbed gift, and even if he's retaining a very large amount of movable property for himself, that it's going to, check the box and qualify for the Shechiv Mera, and that it's going to create a standard, and so that we have something to operate on, so that even if he's turning over a very, very small amount of land, keeping huge amount of gems and gold and pearls for himself, that's going to be the standard of which that counts as the gift, the deathbed gift. So the Mishnah is discussing a case in which the Shechiv Mera performs a kinyan, and he doesn't write his will. He's saying it verbally. And in the situation, the Mishnah ruled that if the Shechiv Mera did not leave any property for himself in this verbal uh, gift, that the gift is going to be voided if he recovers. And the Gemara now wants to get into the Halacha if the Shechiv Mera actually records the kinyan in his will. And he's actually going to write himself a will. And they're going to want to know what is going to be the circumstance where it's not a verbal thing. Up until now, we were doing verbal, and now we're going to get into the written. Rabbi Yossi says, this man, the ill person, knows that a Shechiv Mera can bequest a gift even with mere words, and he need not perform a kinyan. For what purpose, then, did he record the kinyan in the document? He did so in order to make the bequest as valid as the gift of a healthy person. In other words, the gift is going to be valid even if the sick person recovers from his illness. So I want to look at this with the Mara Fulda to help explain it. It says, when he does not record the kinyan in the document, we assume that he does not mean to make his bequest irrevocable. In the present case, however, he took a further step. So there's this additional step he took to record the kinyan in the document. And therefore, we assume that he intended to upgrade the gift to non-sickbed status. So the fact is that now this guy is on his deathbed. He's taking this extra step to write it out so that basically he's upgrading it to be a not deathbed gift. So Rav in Bavli Baba Batra 152a is going to have the same opinion of Rabbi Yossi here. Shmuel is going to disagree with the rules that a gift in this case are invalid. The Tosfot in Ketubot 55b will give an explanation that Shmuel invalidated the transfer whenever an unnecessary kinyan is performed, even if it is not recorded in a document. And according to this approach, the Mishnah, which considers the transfer valid when the Shechiv Mera dies, is referring only to a case in which the Shechiv Mera specifically indicated that the purpose of the kinyan was to enhance the power of the recipient. So the Gemara is gonna, it seems like it's going to be agreeing with here, that it's going to be agreeing with Rabbi Yossi's point of view, but in the Bavli it looks like there's a disagreement between Rav and Shmuel, and that it looks like here the Yerushalmi is in the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, which is the opinion of Rav in the Bavli, and the so that Rabbi Yossi is basically saying that this upgraded version of writing it goes another step, and because of that, this bequest is the same as if he was a healthy person making a gift. So the Gemara is gonna go back to this previous discussion in which the property of the Shechiv Mera must leave for himself in order to make the gift binding in the event of the recovery. So it's going to ask a very interesting question Talmudically, and it's going to say, if the Shechiv Mera retained slaves, what is the law? Does the gift stand if he recovers, or is it rescinded? Now, interesting thing about slaves, and we're going to get more into that in the next halacha, but they're asking this question because Rabbi Bina was talking about movables. What happens if he's retaining movables, but he turned over all of the land? And Rabbi Bina is making the point that the gift is not rescinded. But here now they're requiring, well, what happens if he turned over all the land, but he kept for himself slaves? Halakhically, slaves have the status of land. And here it's basically asking, what happens in this case, is it going to be like that the slaves are like land, or they're going to be like movables regarding this law? So, Talmudically speaking, slaves have the status of land, and we can see that classification from Leviticus 25:46, and that's going to be relevant for deciding such questions as modes of acquisition for acquiring a slave, and also for freeing them, because um, freeing them is going to be different if they were considered to be a movable property. So the question here is, do we understand that the Shechiv Mera, if he retained slaves in order to support himself by the profits of their labor, in which he made a gift, where he gave away the traditional type of land but kept slave for himself, is that going to be a gift where he expected to recover or not? Or would you say that the slaves are viewed as only a provider of a personal service, and that's not really the same as sustaining himself, and that it would be the same as if the Shechiv Mera expected that he would die, and he was basically keeping movable property. So Rabbi Yehuda Barpazi of Bardalea is a name of a place, taught in the Brisa regarding the issue, but we do not know what the Brisa says, and the matter is left unresolved. So we don't really know what the case would be, and we'll ask Eliyahu Navi to know what the law would be just before the Mashiach comes, because you could argue either way, and you could give good arguments either way, and it's just unresolved. We don't know. So the Gemara is going to continue, and it's going to talk about a disagreement concerning deathbed gifts. If the Shechiv Mera wrote a will granting all his property to one person, and he gave the will to him, but then he changed his mind, and he wrote a new will granting all his property to another person, and he gave this second will to him, which beneficiary is entitled to the properties. In other words, the guy comes along, writes a will, gives it to the person, changes his mind, changes his will, puts somebody else in instead, and this person is on the deathbed. Who gets the property, the first person or the second person? By the way, good question, because we see these cases come up in the United States all the time. Person has a will, changes his mind, maybe he's on his deathbed, and then those things go to court all the time. Does the first person get it? The second person get it? And the Yerushalmi is going to tell us what to do in this kind of case, and how does the Das Torah think about it. So Rav says the Shechiv Mera cannot retract the gift. In other words, the properties go to the first beneficiary, but Rav Abba Bar Huna and Rabbi Yochanan said the Shechiv Mera can retract the gift, and the properties go to the second person. So the Mara Fulda, in the case of Rav's point, it's going to point out that Rav is interpreting the delivery of a will to a beneficiary as an indication that the giver renounces his right to renege on the bequest. And therefore, Rav rules that once the first beneficiary receives a written will, it can no longer be reneged on. Therefore, even if the Shechiv Mera subsequently writes a new will, the first beneficiary remains entitled to the possessions, and the second will is voided. So what would be the case of Rabbi Yochanan then? I mean, Rabbi Yochanan clearly is understanding that the delivery of a will is not an indication that the benefactor wishes to forego his right to renege. And accordingly, when he reneges and draws up a new will, the first will is voided, and the second beneficiary becomes entitled to the possessions. So the Gemara is going to apply these Amoraic opinions to a specific case, and they're going to see, what do we do, and what case would they be picking? what do we do as this litmus test whenever these sorts of issues come up? We're going to try to figure out if the person can eat truma or not, because that's going to really be the test about whether it transferred or not. So the Gemara is going to ask, it says, what should one do if among these properties was a slave, and his first master, the Shechiv Mera, as well as the second master, that's the first beneficiary, they were Kohanim. But the third master, that would be the second beneficiary, was a Yisrael. So now they want to know that, hey, this slave that gets transferred from one Kohen to the next Kohen, okay? The beneficiary number one is a Kohen, and then the person giving the deathbed gift changes his mind and gives it to the Yisrael. So now the slave, does he go and eat truma or not? Because we know that a slave is allowed to eat truma in the household of a Kohen. So what's going to be the halacha? So according to Rav, he may eat the truma, since Rav holds that the properties go to the first beneficiary, who's a Kohen. However, according to Rav Abba Bar Huna and Rav Yochanan, he may not eat truma, since they hold that the properties go to the second beneficiary, who's a Yisrael. And the sugya continues, and it says, all agree that if his first master, the Shechiv Mera, was a Yisrael, the slave may not eat truma because the Shechiv Mera might recover from his illness, and then the bequest would be voided retroactively. And if this happens, it emerges that the Shechiv Mera, who's a Yisrael, had owned him all along. So this is going to clear up the case about what Rabbi Yossi was saying, that if a person is making a bequest and he's using it with writing in a document, and is it going to be like the bequest is going to be valid, like the same as if a healthy person went and gave it? And so when we dig, it would seem that actually in the case of the document, when we put the litmus test to it, that in the case of, because there's no disagreement that in this case that if the slave were in the property of the Yisrael and he wrote a document to give it to a Kohen, and even if both were Kohanim, even if the first beneficiary and the second beneficiary were Kohanim, but the Yisrael were there, they all agree that he would not be able to eat the truma, because if he got better, he would have recovered from the sickbed gift and he would get his property back. So it's like he had the claim on it all along. The transaction never occurred. The gift never occurred. So I think it takes more investigation to see what Rabbi Yossi's opinion is here, and to see what the halacha lamaisa would be, because it would seem that Rabbi Yossi is pointing out here that the gift would be like if a sick person recovered. In other words, he's upgrading this with this document, and it's no different. In other words, he has the presence of mind to write out a document, and they're saying that it's not the same as a verbal sickbed gift, and they're saying that hey, it's a different kind of kinyan now. And now when they're talking about it with Rav here and with Rabbi Yochanan, they're saying that it is like a Shechiv Mera gift, even if it's in writing. So it's going to be interesting. I want to look at the Mara Fulda here, and he says that up until this point, the Shechiv Mera handed over wills to the respective beneficiaries, and the actual words of the Yerushalmi is being used to describe the case where it would be more like he wrote over the properties to this one, and then he changed his mind and wrote them over to that one. And with this simple meaning of how it's written in the Yerushalmi here, it's meaning that in the simple meaning of the words, says the Mara Fulda, that the Shechiv Mera did not hand over wills to the beneficiaries or enhance the gift in any way. He simply made a regular sickbed gift. So this is a good way to sort of resolve this seeming conflict between what Rav and Rabbi Yochanan are saying over here and what Rabbi Yossi is saying back there. In other words, Rabbi Yossi is still right because they're saying, no, if you're doing an elaborate will, that is going to be a formal gift, and that's an upgrade. So that's no different than a healthy person giving a gift, and that there is an expectation that he will recover, and that if the healthy person gives a gift, he can't recover it. But what we're talking about here, apparently, according to the Mara Fulda, and the difference here is that this is not a simple, that this is now a simple writing, and it's not a formal will, and that he simply wrote it over. And in this case, where the writing is very simple, then that's what's going to leave it as a regular sickbed gift. So you can see here that there's three categories that Yerushalmi is pointing out for the Halacha. You have an elaborate formal will that's complicated. And in that case, that's going to be like what Rabbi Yossi said. In the case where it's going to be an oral agreement, it's going to be like what Rabbi Bina said. But here, with what Rav and what Rabbi Yochanan are talking about, that's going to be a very simple writing. Very, very, very simple. It's in writing, but it's very simple. And this, now the question is going to be, well, does it go to the first beneficiary or the second one in this sort of case? So the Gemara is going to talk about a proof to the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Abba, and it's going to say, Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Bun, said in the name of Rabbi Huna, this Baraisa supports the view of Rav Abba Bar Huna and Rabbi Yochanan, that if a healthy person wrote a sickbed will, a daitiki, or a Shechiv Mera wrote a gift document, he may renege on the bequest. Now, so the Shechiv Mera, this is going to be this case where you have the daitiki, and he states upon his death that the property should be given to so and so. That's what it's going to be saying. That is going to be a formal will. In other words, this is not going to be a simple writing. He's going to say, on the event of my death, that this property goes to so and so, and that they're saying that becomes like a will. So then they're saying that, so if a healthy person wrote a daitiki, which is a sickbed will, or Shechiv Mera wrote a gift document, he may renege on the bequest. Because when we say that a healthy person who writes a sickbed gift, when he writes a sickbed will, may renege on a gift, is he still not a healthy person when he reneges? Surely he is. So similarly, says the Sugya, when we say that a Shechiv Mera who wrote a gift document may renege on his gift, he is not still a Shechiv Mera when he reneges. So let me explain that. We're gonna look at the Mara Fulda to help us to understand what's going on here. So evidently, the Baraisa, says Mara Fulda, is saying that a Shechiv Mera may retract his gift even when he did not recover from his illness. And now a gift document is ordinarily given to the recipient of the gift. So we see that the Shechiv Mera may retract his bequest even after a document that records it has been handed to the recipient, as Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Abba ruled. So, although in Rabbi Yochanan's case, the document in question was a will, and in the Baraisa's case, it is a gift document, The Gemara's proof is nevertheless valid, for if a Shechiv Mera can renege even after executing a gift document, it stands to reason that he can certainly renege after executing a will. And the Brisa is actually conveying an extra novelty by teaching this law that the Shechiv Mera can renege in the case of a gift document, and in this case, if the Shechiv Mera recovers, the gift is not automatically void. In other words, the gift document affects a kinyan, and therefore is included in the teaching of the Gemara above, that where a Shechiv Mera records a kinyan in the document, his gift is not automatically void upon recovery. So the Bryce is teaching that the Shechiv Mera may still renege on the gift in this case, even if he did not recover. So if you want to see more about this, check out Chosen Mishpat in chapter 250, in Sif 250, and number 17 and 19. And you can see more about that in Chosen Mishpat. So the Gemara is going to continue, and it's going to say, which document is a daitiki? It is a sickbed will, which can be described as follows. The sugya reads, this document shall be for me valid and enduring in all that is written in it, that if I die, my properties shall be given to so-and-so. So that this is basically naming the beneficiary in the will, and it's describing in Jewish law that this person um, is making a transfer. So the question is, okay, is this going to be a kinyan? Is this going to be a kinyan? Um, and that is going to be something which could be reneged upon. So then, what's going to be the gift document? What's going to be the gift document? So, which is the gift document? Asks the Yerushalmi, and it says it is any document that conveys a gift while the donor is alive, even one that states all my properties are given to so and so as a gift from now on. So the Vilna Gaon is going to explain this a little bit, this kind of gift document, and it's going to say like this. It says this is an example of a gift document. Certainly, a gift document is valid if it does not include all his property, and if it did not state that the transfer should take effect from now. So the Brisa is evidently stating that its case as an extra novelty. Perhaps the novelty is that even if he gives away all his property from now, the kinyan is valid and he cannot claim it by merely joking. A different explanation of the novelty could also be where that the entire where that this entire statement is concerning the gift document. So the Gemara is going to inquire. In other words, it's gonna go back to the previous discussion. So now we know that there's these three cases. You have this oral transfer, you have a gift document, and you have a will. And in the case of Rabbi Yossi is talking about a will, and that is basically going to be a more formal thing. We just talked about the language of it. But now you have this question of the gift document. The person's giving the gift document. That's why we can see that it's complicated to say, well, you changed it. Does the beneficiary number one get the property, or does it go to beneficiary number two? And the Brisa, was just stating that if the Shechiv Mera can renege on the gift document, even if he'd written it and delivered a gift document to the recipient, so the Gemara is going to ask the following question. It's going to say, if in the gift document was written that it should take effect from today, what is the law? May the Shechiv Mera renege on his gift even in this case? And the Gemara is gonna ask an incident, and it's gonna explain an incident to help to resolve this. The sister of Rabbi Gurion, when she was a Shechiv Mera, wrote over her properties to her brother in a document that specified the gift should take effect from today. And her older brother then went and appeased her. And she wrote over the properties to him, and then she died. And the case came before Rabbi Imi for adjudication. In other words, this is not a will, and it's written like a gift document where it says, from today, this gift goes to so and so, or all my properties are given to so and so as a gift from now. In this case, is written from today. And they want to know from Rabbi Imi, does it go to person number 1 or person number 2? And it's a good question. Rabbi Imi said, this is what Rabbi Yochanan said. A Shechiv Mera can renege on a gift. And Rabbi Zera said, does Rabbi Yochanan not agree that if the term from today was written in a document, that the Shechiv Mera cannot renege on the gift? So, in other words, the Maharal Fulda points out, since it was stated explicitly that the gift takes effect while he is still living, we understand that the Shechiv Mera did not intend to make a sickbed gift, but rather an ordinary non-sickbed gift. And even if the gift document contains other expressions that indicate that the gift takes effect upon his death, it is nevertheless considered a sickbed gift. And such a document with contrary expressions is understood as granting, the land, itself immediately, and the rights to the produce upon, the beneficiary's death. So basically, um, you know, Rabbi Yochanan is agreeing that, that cannot renege on the gift. So maybe Rabbi Zera understands that this is from another brisa that's teaching that a gift document, even if it says all my property should be given as a gift from now, perhaps Rabbi Zera's understanding that the novelty taught in this brisa is that even if the author of the properties is a Shechiv Mera, and that is why she's giving away all the properties, and we nevertheless construe the gift as an ordinary non-sickbed gift, since he explicitly stated that it should take effect from now. So there's a lot going on here, and I recommend looking at the Vilna Gaon's commentary to get a explanation for final understanding on it. So Rabbi Abahu is going to come and say that in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, he did not renege on his gift in this case. Rabbi La came and said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, he cannot renege on the gift in this case. And Rabbi Imi remembered that Rabbi Yochanan had in fact said this, and he reversed his ruling. So basically, they're saying that this is a type of kinyan where you can't change it. That this was affected by the first person, and you can't change it because he said in the original document from today, and by coming along and saying that the gift should take effect from today, it's going to be a case where they can't renege. So the Mishnah states and moves along and says, if one writes his properties to his son's in a will, and he assigns to his wife land, in other words, land whatsoever, and she indicates her acceptance of this arrangement, she forfeited her right to collect the ketubah. That's what the Mishnah writes. So the Gemara is going to discuss how she indicates her acceptance. Again, this can be a case where perhaps in the ketubah she has, she owns 25% of his assets. It's written in that kind of way, and perhaps they were poor and they got very wealthy and they have a huge amount of land and they have a lot of kids and they want to give away a lot of the stuff in the lifetime. So the this is a way. This would be a way where they can reduce the amount of the ketubah and transfer a lot of it to the children, and do it where they're leaving her land, and but she has to acquiesce to it, and it has to be in a free way. And we can see where if somebody were very poor and became extremely rich over their lifetime, and they wanted to leave over a lot of property and land to their children, that this is something that could happen. So Rav said the Mishnah refers to a case where the sons transfer the estate to his sons through the agency of his wife. So, in other words, the Mara Fulda writes that she performed the kinyan of Khalifin using her own object to effect the transfer of the estate to her sons. And since the wife actively participated in the transfer of this property and she accepted a small gift for herself, there's no doubt that she fully approves of the gift of the property to her sons and that she wishes them to receive it unburdened, without a lien on her. If, however, she did not receive a small gift for herself, then she can claim that she performed the kinyan only not to aggravate her husband. So in that case, it would not be a valid kinyan. Shmuel says the sugya, the Mishnah refers to a case where the husband distributes the properties to his sons in her presence and she did not protest. According to Shmuel, it is not necessary for the wife to act as the son's agent in the transfer. The mere fact that the transfer is effected in her presence and she is silent suffices to indicate that she relinquished her lien on the property being transferred. However, this applies only where she too was given land. If she did not receive anything for herself, her silence is not construed as an agreement. Rather, it is assumed that she was silent only because she did not want to aggravate her husband. So the Rabbi Yossi ben Chanina says they have taught here one of the leniencies of the ketubah. In other words, even if she was not present when the husband distributed the properties to her sons, as long as he said to her, quote, take this land for yourself, for your ketubah, when he gave her the portion assigned to her, and she did not protest, the ruling of the Mishnah applies, and in this case too, she is assumed to forego her right to collect the ketubah from the property she assigned to her sons. So, according to Rabbi Yossi, the wife need not even witness the transfer of the estate to these sons, provided that she that the husband made the statement to her when she received her gift. If she did not protest, it is assumed that she accepted her husband's terms and renounced her right to the rest of the properties. There's an opposing view in the Bavli, which is going to reject that opinion. The Gemara is going to comment, and similarly, Bar Kappa taught Baraisa that says they have taught here one of the leniencies of the Ketubah law, and the Gemara is going to elaborate on the third opinion, and Rabbi Ba said, according to the reason of Rabbi Yosei Bar Chanina, not only a ketubah of a manna or of 200 zuz is she assumed to forfeit with such a slight indication, but even a ketubah of 1,000 dinar she is assumed to forfeit. For with regard to this larger ketubah, we also say that they have taught here one of the leniencies of the ketubah laws. So Rabbi Ba is teaching that the special leniencies of the ketubah laws apply also to traditional amounts added to the base ketubah. This is going to be disputed by other Amorim. And if you want to know what is going to be the Halacha Lamaisa, you have to look it up, because there's a lot of disagreement between Rav and Shmuel. Rav and Shmuel are going to agree that the Mishnah's law is a special leniency that applies only to the ketubah obligation. But what is going to be the halacha lemaisa? That's something that we have to look up and check. But anyway, we can see here that property rights are important and they are complicated, and it's so important to study Chos and Mishpat, especially if you're doing business, to study Chos and Mishpat, because what might seem logical to you might not really be Das Torah, might not really be what the sages and the Torah and the tradition and what the tradition we have going back from Moshe Rabbeinu might not be what Hashem thinks a valid transfer would be. So we have to be very careful, because if you do it wrong, you are stealing. And if you are stealing, you will be punished. So we have to really be careful. We have to guard the statutes, and part of guarding the statutes is learning about them so that we can understand how to do them and look at them. Have a great day.